The night was thick with humidity as Miss Tiny and Rasta John climbed the steep, winding path into the hills. The village lights grew faint in the distance, swallowed by the misty darkness. Their footsteps echoed in the quiet, the only sound apart from the occasional drip of water from overhanging leaves. Miss Tiny's breath was heavy, but she pushed on, driven by a deep, fierce determination. "You sure this the place?" Miss Tiny whispered, glancing at Rasta John as they neared a small, abandoned hut hidden in the bush. Rasta John nodded, his eyes scanning the dark landscape. "Johnny been hiding up here for days, but dem man from Kingston not far behind." Miss Tiny's heart pounded. She had to find Johnny before they did. But just as they reached the hut, they heard a rustle nearby. Both froze, listening intently. Out of the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was Mr. Johnny, his face gaunt and hollow, his eyes wide with fear. "Tiny, you shouldn't be here," he croaked, his voice shaky. He glanced nervously behind him, then back to her. "Dem man coming for me. If dem find you here, you in danger." Miss Tiny took a step toward him, her expression hardened. "Johnny, me now leave until me hear the truth. You put Sandra in dis mess. Me want to know why." Johnny's face contorted with guilt, but before he could respond, another sound pierced the silence, a vehicle approaching in the distance, headlights cutting through the dark. Mr. Johnny's face went pale. "Run," he whispered urgently, his eyes darting to the side. "Dem here." But it was too late. The vehicle skidded to a stop near the hut, and out stepped the same two men who had stormed into Miss Tiny's shop. They weren't alone this time. More men, heavily armed and menacing, emerged from the truck. The leader, the man with the machete, grinned wickedly when he saw Mr. Johnny. "Well, well, well," he sneered, stepping forward, his machete gleaming in the dim light. "We finally catch up with you, Johnny, and it look like you bring company." Miss Tiny, though her heart raced with fear, squared her shoulders. "Leave the girl out of this," she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "You want Johnny, fine, but Sandra no deserve dis." The leader laughed cruelly. "Sandra, you no know what you talking about, old woman. Dat girl already part of the deal. Johnny owe big money and she's collateral." Miss Tiny's blood ran cold. "Collateral? For what?" Johnny, trembling, finally spoke. "Me had no choice, Tiny," he said, his voice cracking. "Dem had me by the throat. Me had to use Sandra name to cover me debts. But now me can't fix it. The man dem want blood." The leader raised his machete, pointing it directly at Johnny. "Time's up, Johnny. Ya take too long to pay up." Just as the situation seemed to turn fatal, Rasta John stepped forward. "Wait," he shouted, holding up his hands. "Ya nah touch Johnny. Not yet." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Who ya think you be, stepping into me business?" Rasta John's face was unreadable, but his voice was firm. "Me know the man you're working for. Me know that if Johnny dead, you won't get a cent. Me can get you what you want, but you haffy leave the girl alone." The men looked at each other, uncertain. The leader studied Rasta John for a long moment, then slowly lowered his machete. "You haffy get us our money and quick, or it won't just be Johnny who gwan disappear. Me want you word." Rasta John nodded. "Me word solid." Without another word, the men got back in their truck and sped off, their headlights disappearing into the distance. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with tension and dread. Miss Tiny turned to Rasta John, her voice filled with confusion and suspicion. "How ya plan to mek this right, John?" she asked. "And who really are you?" Rasta John looked at the ground for a moment, then back at Miss Tiny, his face shadowed with secrets he'd long kept hidden. Me wasn't always Rasta, he admitted quietly. Me used to be deep in dem tings. Same life as Johnny, same kind of people. Me know how to work round dem because me used to be one of dem. But me change. Me no live dat life anymore. But now, me gwine use me past to save Sandra and fix dis mess. Miss Tiny stared at him, her mind racing. She had known Rasta John for years, but never this side of him. Could she trust him? And more importantly, could he really save Sandra? Johnny, still shaking, stepped forward, his voice pleading. Me sorry, Tiny. Me never wanted to involve Sandra. Me couldn't see another way out. But now, me need your help. Me need you to save me and the girl. Miss Tiny's heart was heavy, torn between her loyalty to the village and her deep-seated anger at Johnny for putting Sandra at risk. But there was no time to dwell on her feelings. Sandra's life hung in the balance, and now so did Johnny's. Just as they began to make a plan, a loud crash echoed through the hills, followed by the sound of men shouting. Rasta John's face turned pale. "They back," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But this time, dem not alone." Miss Tiny's breath caught in her throat as the sound of footsteps grew louder, and she knew time was running out faster than any of them had expected.